TGIM, thank God it is Monday. Today, the 12th of December 2022. We thank God for the fact that He has brought us in this year and that it is finally coming to pass. We are all welcome to this session of Thank God It is Monday. For those of us that may be joining us for the first time or maybe watching this series for the first time, Thank God It's Monday is an informal conversation. It actually has no formal direction. It's really an informal conversation that happens every Monday at lunchtime. The background to this conversation was an incident. I don't know what had happened that particular weekend, but that particular Sunday, I read several status on social media, and they were all lamenting that the weekend was over and it was back to Monday again. And it got me thinking uh, about how we very much love the weekend to come, and we say, thank God it's Friday, and then we dread the Monday to come. And yet, Monday gives us an opportunity to work, and work is a good thing. Work is a beautiful thing. Actually, for the Christian, when you go to the Bible, work actually a product of the covenant that we have with God. And so, in order to restore that pleasure in work, that joy in work, the conversation started around work and aspects that are related to work. And one of the things that you cannot definitely separate from work is the issue of education. And so a number of the conversations are based around education as well. About 2 months ago, we started a series which we called Raising the Next Generation. The background to that series is the fact that over 80% of our population as Ugandans are young people. They are below the age of 25 or 80%. And actually, over 50% are below the age of 18. Now, that got me quite thinking that this country does not belong to us. If you're 40 plus, you know that you're in the minority 10 or 15%. Actually, I think the minority 10% if you're above 40 years of age. And so I realized that no, this country actually does not belong to us. It belongs to the next generation. It belongs to our children. It belongs to our kid brothers uh, more than belonging to us. And so we've been looking at a number of things that can help us uh, to raise the next generation. We've looked at their education. We've looked at raising their skills, and we've looked at raising those that are super talented. Last week we looked at how we can deal with the most of corruption right early, right from their age. And today we are handling a topic that seems close to the powers that be, and yet I dare say it seems to keep eluding us. It seems to keep eluding us. The question of science and promoting science, especially among the young people, among the next generation. It's agreed a policy that we need to raise scientists in this country. We've had moves that have come up around about 2001 or so, a policy, an educational policy was introduced making physics, chemistry, and biology compulsory at all level. And to me, what that did, by that time, I was teaching in a third world private secondary school, and to me, what I witnessed that do was that it introduced 3 extra 9s or targets slips, because for the entire period that I taught at that school, that was through my vacation, through university, the model mark in each of those three was an F9. When you'd have 1 or 2 people not get an F9 in physics, chemistry, or biology, it would be 7, and it's a miracle. I think I can count on the period of 10 years that I taught there, the number of people that had credits. There were very few, and I don't remember a single distinction in any of those subjects. And we now recently have another move that has been brought up of paying the sciences a different pay rate from the arts. And again, especially for in the school setting, in a university setting, will that promote science? I was considering how many science teachers on government payroll we have in the country. You'll be surprised the number is so small. And then again, I reflected the science that I learned. How much of it have I been able to implement? But what disturbs me even is the people that have had the science in activity. How much of it have they been able to implement? And the question should that really disturb me. Every other minute, I would see colleagues that studied science getting into the work field, and they are delving into what you'd traditionally call arts-related professions. And again, got me wondering, could we be doing something wrong? Is there something we need to change? These questions that I did not have an answer. Maybe also I need to mention an interesting that at a personal level, I was one of those students who balanced most of my subjects. And growing up, primary, lower secondary, I really felt I was going to be a scientist, because even in secondary, there were cases where I actually got up to 100% in mathematics. And of course, after senior 4, I had D1, and then I opted for arts. But one of the factors, I attribute my change to 2 factors. One of them was that my arts teacher, especially the literature teacher, did so good a job that they loved art more than the sciences. And I usually tease my O-level literature teacher that she is responsible for my not being a scientist, because she made literature so interesting. The other reason, which should be of concern, is the issue of my eyesight. I began developing eyesight challenges around about P7, and eventually it got diagnosed to be a condition they call keratoconus. Now, I could not have the treatment that I needed in upper primary, in upper P7, lower secondary. So as a result of that, I could not see clearly, to the extent that I could not even see the blackboard. So even when I sat at the front of the class, so each time the teacher started the blackboard, I would have to switch because I could not follow. Now, definitely that affected as well reading of because you need close observation, you have to see every drop. If I would not be able to see them, and I came up with I suspect most not, and probably they're coming to be something like he needs to more attention in class. Without any of them kind of taking attention to the practice. And then the other issue is could something have been done at that point? Because maybe before that challenge, the country lost maybe another engineer or so. I do not know what the rest of my career taken had I gone for this. We especially discuss
Ernest, your network is really bad. We can barely hear you anymore.
Let me take off my video. Does that help?
Much better, yes.
Okay, sorry, I am in Lira City. And yeah, thank you, Solomon, for the heads up. I hope I can now be heard.
Yes, you're clear. We can proceed.
We are going to thank you. We are going to get into today's discussion, but before we get to our guests, I'll give an opportunity to about 3 people to just share with us their experience with science. Any 1, 2, 3 people that would love to share the experience? I do not want to choose randomly, so I would have preferred, but if I am forced to, I don't want to. Okay, yes, Vincent. Vincent, you can go ahead and share. Jeremy? And go ahead and share. I'm not sure whether you can hear me now. Vincent, you can go ahead and share. Okay, do you hear me now? Let me just have some feedback. Am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, okay, thank you. If Vincent is not ready,
Vincent's hand is raised.
Yes, yeah, but either he's not hearing us or well, or maybe his network, or it was by mistake. Let me just randomly ask 2 people to share. I'm going to ask to request Grace Magala, just in 30 seconds or so, just experience. And then Audrey, allow me also to ambush you. and just request you just tell us briefly what has been your experience with science. Grace, are you able to talk to us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Yes, Grace, what
Hello.
has been your experience with science?
Yes, science. Right from school, I really loved sciences. In fact, I wanted to be a doctor. My dream, my that was my dream. In future time, and of course, someone was paying my fees from secondary. He had taken sciences and he didn't want. He said, no, 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 you will not make it. But I wanted science so much. Up to senior 4, I passed. The worst I got, I think, was a C4 in but HS he forced just to pass. So and I did not like history yet. I had a distinction 1. So I was like, what am I? In class, I would doze because I didn't want history. When they are teaching, who understood and next of God, I passed, but I didn't get the marks that he had hoped. I didn't go on government. But still, I hated the arts to the extent, history in particular. I reached campus and they gave me education. So experience was funny to the extent that I keep the parents that I get in touch with, I tell, please try to allow these children, the children to really to participate in what they want, not to force. Because me, I hated what I was doing. First of all, I wanted to do sciences and I didn't do. And then I'm forced to take history because I just passed it. Again, still HSI, I passed it. But anyway, science, I don't know whether they make it complicated to the extent that even these who have taken it, they start scaring others. It is hard. And I was like, what is easy? Because even history itself is not also easy. But that is my experience, and to the extent that I had to drop it out. I taught it for just 1 year, and I said no. I left the whole thing. I no longer teach it, and I don't desire to teach it. Good afternoon. That is my experience.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Loved science, forced not to take it. Wow, in my case, it was the opposite. They tried to force me to do science, and I said no. Sorry, I was seeing Vincent said his microphone was misbehaving. He wanted to speak but failed to. Sorry, I hope at one point you'll be able to speak. Audrey says, my father made it clear that the only acceptable subject combination was in sciences. I started out with the combination at A level, but had to change to what was more palatable for I think what was more palatable, more to his disappointment. Same thing happened to my siblings, okay? So again, there they tried to force her to do sciences and it just did not work out. Okay, thank you. I would like to recognize in a special way, I'll give him an opportunity to speak at the end, but I'd like to recognize my uncle, my grandpa, Dr. Yusuf Mpaire, who actually happens to have been one of the very first doctors in the country and one of, if not the first, one of the very first PhDs, doctorates in medicine in the country. You're welcome, Dr. Mpaire. Thank you for joining us today and at the other moments. We'll now get to our guest conversationist, BENGE Solomon King. King is an interesting person. There are many stories I could share, but I will not go into them. But maybe to say that I first interacted with him at an All Saints Cathedral camp. in our P7 vacation. And I remember at the end of the camp when we were parting, he told me, see you at Budo next term. Now, I think my faith was a little less than his. We both had put our first face to King's College, Budo, but I think Sami, it's for adults. To clarify, it's for adults, but it's not, there's no PG, so the kids can join in if they so wish, but it's primarily adults. Yes, so I was saying, I think my faith was a little less, or maybe, I don't think it was my faith. I really believed I would make it because I was not a poor performer, but my upbringing did not allow me to straight say I will make it directly. It was yeah, but anyway, true to his farewell bid, we again met at S1 in Budo and were together for the 6 years at King's College Budo. And he will tell us what happened after Budo. I think it is his story, whereas I made no chunks of it here and there. It is his story, so I'll leave it to him. But today he's more known for FUNDI bots, which he founded and leads, which is a project meant to promote science. And so I felt he was the most appropriate person. Maybe what I'll mention is that through school, I saw him implement, apply science and technology at all turnings of his life through school. Things that where I was not able to translate the classroom into my life, he was able to do that. King, you're welcome this afternoon. Thank you for accepting to share with us. I know that you do not do many public engagements, so I do not take it for granted. I'll request you to kindly introduce yourself, what you do, what your experience has been with science in your life, and then after that, we'll get into the topic. You're welcome, King.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katwesigye. It is an honor to be speaking with this group of people. I'm sure everyone is exceptional in their own way. I'll turn on my camera just a bit so that you can put a name to the face, and then I'll turn it off afterwards just because of internet issues. So my name is Solomon King Benge. Yes, King is my middle name. A lot of people ask me about it, but it is my middle name given to me by my father. So I generally go by Solomon King on social media and public profiles. I'm the founder of FundiBots. Some of you may be aware about FundiBots. We are mostly known for our robotics trainings for children. However, our work expands beyond that, and I'll talk about it briefly. I generally like to do question and answer sessions because I think that it gives a strong opportunity for deeper engagement because the presentation may not necessarily address all of the questions that people have and sort of the follow-on talking points. Thank you, Dr. Ernest, for inviting me. It's been such a long time since we last interacted and even longer since we left school. I'm glad that you are following in your passion and pursuing the betterment of mankind, as I've always known you to. So my background is very similar to what Ernest said. The reason that I started FundiBots was because of the kind of child that I was. Like many of you, we grew up in the 90s and there was no internet, no access to information. The best place to get any sort of knowledge was either a school library or TV if you had that opportunity. And then if you're lucky, you'll find a random magazine that, that's lying by the roadside and it has information you need. So I spent my childhood very curious about technology. Everything that I would see on TV, I would want to create in the real world. And so I was that kid that was going around people's rubbish bins looking for old or dead electronics and then getting them and trying to understand how they worked. I made some of my first connections, my first electronics connections when I was 5 or 6 years old. And this was basically a self-taught experience where you just get an old radio and try and see what's inside it that makes those lights come on or that makes those cassette motors turn. So for a long time, I was fascinated by technology, but the world that we lived in did not cater for people like me. The Uganda that we lived in did not cater for people like me. There were no resources, no facilities, there was no mentorship or guidance. In fact, my father, even though he enjoyed watching me make things, he didn't take it seriously, and he barely supported me. So it was a very frustrating experience. I was trying to, I remember two of my earliest projects when I was in primary school. One was trying to make a helicopter, and everything was there, but the motor just wouldn't have enough energy for the helicopter to fly. And this was P3, P4. And then later on is when I realized that the aeroplane wings needed to be in a certain shape, blah, 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 blah. But of course, there was no way it could work. And then the other was building my first robot in primary 5 and trying to make it behave like the robots that I saw on TV. But obviously, I didn't know what I was doing. So it was just, something that was just trying to do things. Those of you who grew up in the 90s, you remember the wired cars that we used to make. So, you'd make it with wires and then you drive it using a stick. I was the kid that was connecting motors and batteries, and my car was being driven by electricity. So I was really excited about the potential of going to secondary school because I'd had so much about subjects like physics and chemistry and biology, and that schools had labs and you could do all sorts of experiments. And so I was like, okay, maybe this will be a break from primary school, which was all about memorizing information, which was all about the exam. So I get to secondary school. I went to King's College Budo, as Dr. Ernest mentioned. And while it was a good school, it was still all about passing the exam, right? Back then, it was a lot better. Back then, I think schools were more well-rounded in terms of ensuring that the student has a foundation for academics, for sports, for faith, for community work, etc. From what I'm hearing, from what I'm hearing and seeing, a lot of schools don't have that anymore. So while it was a good learning experience, while it was a good education, and one that I'm eternally grateful for, it did not satisfy the curiosity that I had as a child that wanted to truly understand how the world worked. So obviously, because I was older, first of all, and I was in a place that had more resources. I loved the school library, but I also had some money that I could use to buy, you take your pocket money and you buy some super glue on your way to town, and then also on your way to school, and then you can easily make things at school. I spent a lot of time tinkering, and those are some of the things that I'm well known for for those who went to the school during our times. So the turning point in my line of work, we like to call it the inflection point. The inflection point for what would eventually become the story of FundiBots was my discovery of a very exciting book called The Engineer in Wonderland. I was that kid who was always in the dusty corners of the school library because the textbooks did not excite me. What excited me was the encyclopedias, the old physics books that were more about stories of engineering and great scientists. And so I always used to find myself in the weirdest corners of the school library reading the dustiest books. I discovered this book and it changed my life because I saw that science could be fun. It was written by an engineer from the Royal Society in the UK, and he used to give Christmas lectures for children. And so I just saw that his process of explaining science was just so friendly and so inviting. And so I took these experiments to our teacher to our physics teacher at that time. And I basically asked him, can we do these experiments? Because they look really exciting. And he basically told me to focus on my books because those things were not relevant to the curriculum. And so that moment for me was, when I think back and trace back, that moment for me was the catalyst, because after that, I kept thinking to myself, there has to be a better way than this. And I told myself, you know, as naive as I was back then, that if I ever got rich and got money, I would create a place where students could thrive, where education wasn't really based on how well you performed in class or in an exam, but about the understanding. Obviously, I have more clarity now about what I was thinking about back then, but you know, I was 13 or 14 at that time, and my thought process wasn't as clear as it is right now. But I know that that's what I wanted to create, a place where kids like me could thrive and learn and be encouraged and guided. I was a pretty high performer in primary school and secondary school. It takes a lot of work to stay in Budo for 6 years. So I kept my grades and spent the full 6 years. And then I did sciences in A-level. However, despite all that strong performance, my final exam, my UACE, did not go as well as I expected. I struggled. I had an issue with my art project because I did PCM art. I had an issue with my art project, and so I got a low score on that. And then I didn't do, I think it was mathematics, I didn't do as well as I normally did. And so I wanted to do engineering, electrical engineering at Makerere University, and instead I got architectural diploma in Chambogo. But more to that, what I really wanted to do this was now 2000, I wanted to do microelectronics and robotics, and those courses were not in Uganda, and they're still not in Uganda. So obviously that was out of the question because my parents absolutely could not afford to take me abroad. So I joined Chambogo. During my Essex vacation, I joined an internet cafe. Truly grateful because that was also another pivotal moment in my life. Joined an internet cafe and discovered the internet for the first time. Because I was an employee, I had access to the internet, and I gained so much trust with the owners of the cafe that they would basically trust me enough to leave me with the keys, and then I would spend the entire night just absorbing information from the internet. So a lot of the skills that I have right now, from website design, microelectronics, programming, robotics, 3D design, almost everything that I practice right now had a foundation at that time. And that was purely because someone trusted me enough and I had the resources that I needed. I joined Chambogo University and dropped out in my first semester because 1, I didn't want to be an architect. 2, I tried changing courses a little. I tried doing science, technology and physics, dropped out of that. But then at some point I realized that I was learning so much more outside of the school and I really didn't see a future within the school system. So I dropped out in my first semester and I have not been back to school since. But it's not something that I encourage, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. I do encourage students publicly and privately. I encourage students to finish their academic qualification, to get their academic qualifications, and they can learn from the school of life elsewhere. So because of that, those skills that I picked up in those spaces, at the cafe, I became good. I'm a very fast learner. I'm a very intuitive learner. So I picked up enough skills to become good at something that people were willing to pay me to do work for them. And back then, if you knew how to design websites, you were much sought after. But because I was young, of course, I was exploited. I did not get paid the money that I should have been paid, and the big money was going to the people who owned the companies that were outsourcing work to me. So I started doing websites. I started a couple of companies. So I'll just skip through that journey from 2001 to 2011, because I started a few companies. We did a lot of TV advertising. You probably saw some of our work on TV for UNICEF, World Bank, MTN, pretty much all the big clients, and also lots of small clients. I started a website hosting company. I started a multimedia company. I started a site called progi.ug that you might have used at some point. I started a community for bloggers called Blog Spirit. I started a community for designers called Design Kingdom. And all that was within the space of 2001 to 2001 to 2011. 2011 is when I met someone who was going around schools talking to students about non-curricular science. So they were talking about the science of space, the science of love. And so when they met me and we discussed and they learned that I was building robots at my home, she basically asked me if I can come and speak to her students about robotics. So I started going to schools. I started demonstrating to students and doing very basic explanations of what robotics are. I would teach about, I would speak about nanotechnology, about space, etc. But the kids were really fascinated by the robots because they could actually see that they could, it was a tangible thing that they could see moving around the ground, etc. So it was around that time when I realized two things. One was that I had enough resources to bring this young dream of mine to life, which basically meant that the FUNDI story could now come to life, the vision that I had when I was young. But second was that the education system had gotten so much worse and that it was almost exclusively about passing examinations. And you can all agree that it's even worse now. So FUNDI started in 2011. Between 2011, I began it as a hobby and then went full-time into it in 2014. So between 2014 and 2017, we worked, between 2014 and 2021, we trained about 11,000 students, 11,500 students, but our growth has been exponential. So between 2014 and 2021, we trained 11,500 students. This year alone, we've trained 10,500 students, and next year we'll be on track to train upwards of 20,000 students. And we are hoping that by 2030, we will reach we will reach 1 million African students by 2030. And we do robotics trainings in schools. We do holiday programs for those out of school. We have a new program that allows, that helps teachers teach science practically. So those of you who are in the education space or proximal to it might know that the quality of education is highly determined by the level of the quality of science education is highly determined by the level of practical science classes in the classroom. So we provide tools that teachers use in the classrooms. They're highly practical, highly experimental, and they're student-centered. So we've designed and piloted a program for that this year. The pilot was with 33 schools, 5,600 students, and 65 teachers. And the pilot has been very successful. We are very excited by it, and we are hoping to expand that to next year. We also provide skills development classes, skills development lessons for university students who are struggling with practical learning. We take them through robotics as the baseline and then give them extremely complex projects that challenge them more than the university is challenging them. So I'll stop there for now. That's my background. That's the FUNDI story. And I'm happy to answer any questions from this point forward. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, King, for that sharing of your life story. I believe that a number of us are challenged by that story. Not very conventional, yet very rich. And probably it's something like that we need. for anyone on the call, you're free to raise your hand and ask a question. You're free to put your question in the chat room. Yeah, but before that, I'll just ask one or a pair of questions that are related. Definitely, to produce the kind of science that we need as a country, we need to catch our young people early enough, to excite them early enough. So I request you to make a comment on the way science is taught currently and how it could be done better, so that we have the correct quality of science that is transforming our country. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Katwesigye. Science is not being taught well. That's the truth. A series of statistics that I like to share is that more than 50% of students are touching lab equipment for the first time at the point when they're doing their final examinations. So you've studied for 4 years, you've studied for 6 years, you're doing an exam in chemistry or biology or physics, and the first time you're seeing the tools for that practical are when you're doing that exam. So obviously you're going to fail. And the further you go into the regions, the failure rate for sciences gets very high. In some places, it's as high as 70%. And the government knows this. There are publications, there's research, there's just enough information out there that people know what the issue is. The issue, the sciences are not being taught well for quite a number of factors, but at the core of it is that science subjects require high caliber teachers. Unfortunately, the teachers coming out of our education system are not good teachers, the majority. Some are excellent, but the majority are not. And this is because education is primarily looked at as a last resort. People want to be engineers, people want to be doctors and lawyers and all that. And when all of that fails, then they're like, okay, fine, let me become a teacher. So you're getting people who are not motivated enough to be teachers. You're getting people who have technically failed to do, and now they've chosen to teach, which means that the caliber of teachers that are going to come out of the classroom, of the teacher training colleges is going to be really low. Then they go into a space that is under-equipped, under-resourced. There are no laboratories. There is no reinforcement of practical learning by the government. And then on top of that, the government is underpaying them. Thankfully now the government has increased their salary, but that has caused its own series of complications, and some are still not being paid. So you have an ecosystem that is basically fighting against both the teacher and the child. And so what happens is that most teachers then resort to just providing enough information so the child can pass, because the benchmark for education excellence is academic performance in an examination. So we've basically devolved into a society into a machine that is getting students out one end and churning out exam results on the other, but the students they're not seeing the purpose of this science in their lives. And that's why you'll have things like, you'll have those memes where people are like, why did I study about the thorax of a grasshopper? How has that helped me in life? Not knowing that everyone has to go through a certain baseline for education so that you begin finding your space. The same way that a scientist would ask why they studied the Rhinelands, because it's not relevant to their work, but it is, because as society, we need a very strong balance of science and arts so that we can have fair, empathetic, honest and forward-thinking mindset as humanity. I do not subscribe to the belief that scientists alone can move the world forward. So, Doctor, to answer your question, it's not being taught well. There are a lot of factors that are at play, and unfortunately, for many parents, because of their decision to look for schools that have high performers, it creates it's a loop where schools know that they'll only get parents and students if they perform well, And what they end up doing then is just preparing for the exam so that the academic performance shows, and then parents see that, and then they're like, that's a good school. And so the pressure just keeps mounting. And it doesn't help that we have a habit of comparing schools against each other, as opposed to focusing on the quality of education that all Ugandans are receiving. So yeah, I have a lot to say on the topic, as you can see, but I'm happy to take another question.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask my next question, I can see Vincent's hand is up. Vincent, I hope this time your microphone will allow you to talk. Yeah, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Doctor. Good afternoon. Sorry, I want to turn on my microphone. The space where I am is a bit tricky concerning network. So, first of all, I would like to appreciate Mr. King for the enlightenment about FUNDI. Personally, I've engaged with FUNDI. I've been there, I think, 3 times. And I think I'm one of the few privileged personnel who have been exposed to it before. And even the system where we work, I'm a teacher professionally, though like he said, not by my choice. It was because of the dictatorship of the government. You perform, then they decide what you do. But when I got into it, like enough, I landed into a curriculum that is quite different from our national setting of the education system, whereby our system that I'm working in is one child at a time. I think, Mr. King, you've seen those kids from Friends International Christian Academy. They are in a different type called Accelerated Christian Education. And given the setting of this curriculum that we're working in, we have been able to inspire many students into the science. I think even this time we had some competitions way back in August, and we had some 2 children who came to your place. I remember they were doing something about robotics, and when we went for performance for the competitions, maybe you didn't know it, but I want to let you know that they won a gold because of the efforts that FUNDI gave us. So they won a gold in their category. Yes, so I want to appreciate you for that. But as well, now like a science teacher, professional, I'm a biology chemistry teacher. Yes, as a science teacher, the first challenge I would always face, I remember when I was doing my course, there was always these questions in my head. How am I going to teach science? You know, you're a teacher already, you're professionally a teacher, then you go into this class, they're going to ask you some questions. The kids, especially concerning some practicals, experimentations, of which even you yourself were not able to go through in your entire education career. But when I got into this system, the good thing we have is that one child at a time, and their work is designed in a way that it intrigues, it brings that sense of self-discovery and being curious to discover by student. So before they do, we go through their work, and that's how we came up with a lab at school to help them do better. And the challenge now we have, because I've been in the lab, I've been working with the science teacher directly, and I thank God that Dr. Ernest is one of our parents, so he knows, given that one of the his daughter actually is one of our clients in the science community. We are doing SOP with her. So the challenge we've been facing, especially now, is the cost of the materials and the availability. I remember there's when we wanted to do something, but then we had to change the child's project. Simply, I think we missed something. There's a material that we needed to fix in, but then we couldn't find it. And then they had to resort to another thing. And even when we found it, it was expensive for the parent to afford, because sometimes as a school, we can't buy it, given that each child does their passion, not dictated by the teacher as in the national curriculum, whereby it's about competition for grades rather than competition for understanding or creating understanding in the child's brain. So if you could help us and maybe enlighten us, the accessibility of some of the materials, especially to do with physics experimentations, because we're having a challenge at school, equipping the lab with that. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
So, King, before you answer that, I want to add another question to it. Just broaden it, and as you answer it, also I advise what should schools do today? What should a parent who has noticed their child has an interest in science do? Over to you, King.
Thank you so much. So Jimmy, it's an honor to meet you on here. I am familiar with the Students Who Won Gold. I think I met them a couple of times in our office, and one of my queries to my team was always, are you sure that the children are doing these projects themselves? Because we strongly discourage students coming to our space and not doing anything on their own, because it's very rampant in the university system. The projects many people present as their university projects have been worked on by professionals. So I'm glad, and yes, I had the story that they won gold. So we are very excited for that progress, and we really hope that stories like that can be reflective of the work that you're doing. Actually, for context, two things I want to clarify, or I just want to mention. One is about 95% of the work that FundiBots does is free of charge. So 95% of our audience accesses our learnings, our tools, our materials free of charge. The vast majority of them are in the urban areas. The second thing is that some of you might have seen a video that went viral a few months ago of those kids from northern Uganda, Komboni College. I think they released another video just recently of them building a solar concentrator. I'm really proud to mention that those are actually FundiBots students. We have a program in their school, and they're part of the FundiBots club in that school. And they were able to do that through the support of FundiBots and their teachers, which then brings us to the issue of materials. Unfortunately, science is not exactly a cheap endeavor. There are tools that we need that have to be used. If you're doing a robotics project, you need to be able to build a robot. But the one thing that you might have noticed, Jimmy, is that the way that FundiBots designs its tools is that we try to make it as low cost as possible. So you'll see a lot of wood, a lot of paper, a lot of materials that you can find from around the house. We only import things when we know that we can't make them locally. So for example, there are things that the projects require a certain type of microchip. We cannot make that, and so we import those. But even then, we try to import them at the best possible price, which is generally from China. The way that I would encourage your school to source those materials is to talk to parents. I know that parents are really burdened with additional costs, but I think that for some things it's worth the investment. But at the same time, the school itself also needs to take the initiative to just go above and beyond, and in order to provide well-rounded learning opportunities for the students. These are financial sacrifices that we make for the benefit of our children's future. And unfortunately, I think FundiBots is already providing them at the lowest possible cost we can, especially for what we call the integrated schools. Upcountry, we give them free of charge because for them, even 5,000 shillings on top of school fees is almost impossible. But one of the things we are trying to do is provide proof to governments and bilateral players that if you invested enough money in solutions like this, you will actually end up with a community and a student body that actually emphasizes innovation, problem solving over just performance and academics. And we hope that that will ripple out into more proactive investment by the government, by teachers, by parents, because they see the long-term results. So Ernest, to answer it, I hope that first part answers your question. Schools really need to invest in this. You cannot learn science by being cheap about science. You have to invest. If the class requests, if the topic requires students to look through a microscope, there's no substitute for that. You have to get a microscope. If the class requires students to learn how to program, there is no substitute for a computer. They need the computer to program. And that's why, like, the countries that are investing in these resources are actually beating us. And I won't go deep into this because I really have a problem with corruption in this country. But if we just chose to invest in the future of this country, these things would not even seem expensive because we're investing in the economic future of our country. So yeah, I wish I could say that there's free money out there, but there isn't, unless you're a nonprofit organization and you're willing to do nonprofit work and be accountable to donors. but schools can also request for some of this money, especially if you're like a community school. The other question is parents. So for parents, it's actually easier than for schools. For schools, you're dealing with numbers. You're dealing with 300, 500, 1,000 students. So everything that you do, you're basically looking at, you know, what does the cost of scaling that out for 500 students look like, for 1,000 students look like. For parents, your investment is in the children under your roof. I cannot emphasize this enough. I strongly recommend you invest in the future of your children. If you have been watching artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence space, AI research is moving at a rate that is scary. I have posted some of those videos in my YouTube channel. The video that I posted, my second to last video, was actually a video in which I was having a conversation about the state of education in Uganda with an artificial intelligence, and it was giving me, I was asking it what we can do, and it was giving me fairly accurate results, and it was mind-boggling. So if you're not investing in your child's ability to navigate this space, you are doing both you and your child a disservice. And that goes for arts and sciences. I don't believe in singularly priming your child to be a doctor or a lawyer. Like, let your child navigate this journey until, you know, as a parent, you're a steward, so you can guide them and give them the advice they need, but they need to be given enough opportunity to make an informed decision. So if they like soccer, help them learn how to play soccer, take them to practice. If they like coding, if you can afford to, get them a laptop, get them some tools. Eventually they'll settle on something and your investment will pay off. But if you want the best for your child, you have to invest in their future. And there are lots of free resources out there on the internet that you can use. But if you need something physical, you're going to have to buy it. Yeah, I hope that answers. I'm also trying to be mindful of the time.
Thank you, King. Yes, I believe that is beneficial. We have to put our money where our mouth is. We can't play lip service to this science thing. And we are soon coming to the close of this conversation. Maybe just to further guide, let me first read Audrey's comment. Audrey types a comment in the chat room. Would FUNDI bots consider developing a curriculum that schools, child or youth programs can use to help grow the creativity and innovation of young people? I'm talking about experiments that can be done to solve community problems. Not all can come to FUNDI bots, and changing how teaching is done may take a long while. Kindly consider helping unexposed people who desire to help but do not know what to do. Thank you for that question and comment, Audrey. And King, as you are responding to that, also, if you could kindly throw more light, I know that a number of parents indeed want to support their children, but they do not know what to buy or where to find it. If you could also offer some little more light, if a parent wants to support their child, are there specific programs, sites on the internet you would recommend, or particular physical programs that you would recommend? If you could very briefly answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. So just to quickly reflect on Audrey's question, FundiBots is actually developing a curriculum. Developing curriculum takes time. So the one that we are actively developing is basically built on top of the national curriculum. And so we are providing resources for teachers to teach science better in their classrooms. And this curriculum, because it's national, we are prioritizing rural and under-resourced areas. So just for context, FundiBots has 4 offices. We have one in Mbara, Gulu, Mbale, and then in Kampala. So each of those regional offices serve the surrounding districts and go to the schools and help teachers teach science better. And we also provide teacher training. So we train these teachers in ICT so that they can use PCs for their own benefit, but also if they're able to use it in classrooms, that's another added advantage. We also teach them how to teach science better using local resources around them. So we really encourage students to, sorry, we really encourage teachers to use those resources. In terms of people coming to FundiBots, you'd actually be surprised. I think during the course of a year, less than 1% of our audience comes to FundiBots. The vast majority are audiences that we go to, and that is the schools. And that's why we generally don't, our holiday classes happen during the UNEB exams, sorry, during the UNEB calendar, as opposed to the international curriculum calendars, because during the school term, we are 100% in the schools. So we do serve a very diverse population, and the people that come to FundiBots are actually the significant majority, sorry, the significant minority of students. So we are working on all of this, Audrey. It does take time. We are building curriculum. We are creating resources. During the pandemic, we put some resources that parents could use online, and some expressed that it was helpful. Ernest, to answer your question about what parents can buy, there are sites online that are free. I think if you've heard about Khan Academy, has classes for kids that they can access at no charge. There are really lots of, YouTube alone is a really powerful resource for students to learn sciences, and FundiBots itself has a YouTube channel, and we are setting up one exclusively for kids, and we provide learning resources on there. We have videos where we teach young people about different topics. YouTube is a fantastic resource, but of course you need to monitor it carefully, because you don't want kids going into the wrong areas. FundiBots also provides some of these tools. We are going to put an online store soon, and I'll share it with Dr. Katwesigye. We have comic books where students can learn science in a fun way by reading about it, reading the experiments that kids are doing, and some of them can actually be followed from home. We have something called a magic box, which is a set of science experiments that is delivered to students at their homes. Those cost about 75,000 shillings per kit. And the magic box essentially is a full set of experiments, a full set of materials and instructions that students can use to learn science. And it's a really fun family experience as well. So FundiBots is a non-profit organization. When you buy all these things, they basically help us reach more students. None of this goes into our pockets. So if you can support it, it'll be welcome. But we are about 98% funded by donors, which basically means that we get our money from actors that are interested in pushing the education and in pushing the envelope of education in the African continent, and we use their money to go to these places. That's why we can afford to give away things for free or at reduced costs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me encourage each and everyone on us on the call to support our children, to support our schools, to next generation, really. As we come to a close, I am going to give an opportunity to Dr. Yusuf Mpaire to make a comment on the topic. Then after that, I'll request King to make his parting remarks. Dr. Mpaire, I hope you are able to unmute and speak to us.
Thank you very much for having organized this talk. My main purpose in participating in your discussion is to learn new things, to be up to date with modern activities. Yes, science is interesting. I am a scientist by training and practice, but so is arts. Arts are interesting in their own way, and if you like, science helps us to understand, solve problems for daily existence, but arts provides us with lasting values, and I don't see how this lesson to say as one is above the other. I personally enjoy music, play chess. At the age of over 80, science, I know nothing now. I've forgotten most of the science. So I appreciate those who persist with art. Art is very interesting also. Philosophy, I love philosophy. And so many things have come to me in the old age, which I've understood better as a scientist. But I'm now understanding better as a philosopher. So don't be discouraged. Those of you who are not scientists, your role in society is also very important. Thank you.
For that reflection of the career as an elder, we definitely know that we benefit from it. And thank you for that comment on the need to balance, the need to be open to new learning. Once again, thank you, King, for accepting to share with us this afternoon. I'll just request you parting shots in relation to the topic, and yeah, we'll close it up. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Katwesigye, and thank you, Dr. Mpaire. Your words resonate very strongly with me. I feel like the humanity has to be balanced. We can't all be scientists, we can't all be artists, but we progress collectively because of our interconnectedness. And so I'm a very, very strong advocate for the philosophy that you are espousing. So thank you for those kind words. To everyone on the call, thank you for having me. It's been an honor sharing our work with you. I really hope that I have inspired some of you to think a little bit outside of the box. The one thing that I really want to encourage you is, as parents or as future parents or guardians, please take good stock of how the world is evolving. Many of the jobs that existed now did not exist 60 years ago. Many of them did not exist 20 years ago. And the world is going to evolve at a rate that is almost unbelievable. So I would highly encourage you to adapt to the change. The best skills that you can give, the best education you can give your children is the ability to adapt, the ability to think innovatively, the ability to get information, process it, and use it to create knowledge. We are moving away from the more, specific skills where you absolutely needed to be one thing. Now we're in a society that requires you to be flexible enough to use technology in the work that you're doing. So please afford your children the best possible opportunities that they can learn this flexibility, read about the fourth industrial revolution, read about 21st century skills. Those two things are going to determine how well your child evolves in the coming years. And for those of you who are teachers, please keep up the good work. It's not an easy journey, but we are in this together, and FUNDI is committed to helping you grow better. Thank you once again for having me, and have a fantastic afternoon. I think our host has dropped off, so I don't know how to close this. Okay, I think we are way past time, so I think we can close the session since Ernest doesn't seem to be on the call. And I think we can leave at our leisure. It's good to see you, Pablo, Ivan, Hilary, and Maweje. Thank you so much for joining the call. Oh, he's back. Good.
Connectivity, one of the issues we need to sort out as a country. Thank Thank you very much, King, once again for sharing your time and experiences with us. I want to appreciate each and everyone who's been on this call. Thank you for being on, and I'll encourage you to join in even next week. We shall have another topic. It's the same link. So even if you do not get a message, feel free to join in. Thank you very much to each of us. God bless you. And once again, thank God it is Monday. Let's go transform our country, continent, and world. God bless you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.